Another thing that's fairly important for most of us is what are you going to do when you finish work? Fair call? Who's already thinking about that by the minute? Yeah. If you happen to work for certain institutions, you might be feeling that it's by the millisecond. What am I going to do when I leave the ark and go off and do my thing? But I'm sure that if you consider closely your thoughts about retirement, that it is not uncommon for each of us to say, I'll wait till I get to the end of the game, and then, after I've made a lot of money from my practice, I'll then spend that money on buying back my health. It's a fairly stupid idea. An alternative might be this. Who's over the age of 50 and closer to death than the other half of the audience? Okay. So for those of us who are over 50, it's important that we recognise that we're getting closer to the other end than the front end. But more importantly, who's in a stable monogamous relationship that's longer than 10 minutes? Put your hand up. Okay. Let's just go with the group who are in the stable monogamous relationships for longer than 10 minutes. Most of us have a picture during our 40s and 50s which is about how we're going. Some of us have an interest in how our other person in our relationship is going. But once you get past about 50, 55, what's important is that many of us start looking at the future. There's three groups of retirees. Group A, we're both well. We can do stuff. We can do stuff anywhere on the planet, but where we want to do stuff on the planet is determined by how much money we've got in the bank. So you can walk a long way on Bribey Island if you're rich like me, or you can actually go and live overseas and climb other mountains in Austria and everywhere else if you're rich like you. So that opportunity to walk anywhere is highly dependent in Group A. Group B, one of us is well and one is unwell. Resentment brews. I can and you can't. I used to and we won't. What about it? No, it's not possible. I'd like to. So that group of people create almost at times fractious relationships which are hampered by their health, not by their bank account. And then Group C, we're waiting outside a large public hospital at a bus stop with our spouse breathing through an oxygen tank, seeing and deciding which clinic we'll visit for the day. And that's the sum outing. And it's unfortunate that if only 2% of the Australian health budget is spent at any time on prevention, and 50% is spent in the last 50 days of life, it's unfortunate that that may become a reality for far too many people. And it will be dangerous if you're under 50 in 20 years' time to actually be game enough to go into the health system. It will be dangerous. It'll be dangerous because there'll be things that you thought will be there, but they won't be there. And that's unfortunate. So it relies on each of you and I to think seriously about what we might do to asset manage our own health and well-being. Now, I'm conscious of being in an organisation. Who works in an organisation, be it their own or someone else's? Okay. Organisations are fascinating at the present moment. The reason why I think they're fascinating is because we're seeing change going through all organisations like never before. And change is fairly important because if we don't have it, we're not going to survive. And yet when you talk to people who might be in an organisation, they have very different outlooks on what is the notion of the pressure that they are under to be able to continue to work. If you're on the top of the food chain, you have what I call competitive isolation, which I want to talk about because many of us as practitioners have competitive isolation. Then if you happen to be in the middle, you'll see that there's pressure from above, there's pressure from below, there's customer resistance and demand, and on the other side there's supplier resistance and demand. So the people in the middle are getting squeezed. Can we just turn the volume down a bit? I think people will start reverberating. So there's that group. Then if you happen to be on the bottom of the food chain, then the food chain people there are resisting things. Why do they resist things? Why? Yeah? There's a lady scratching her face and talking. Yes. Why? Yeah.
Because they've seen what happens to the people above and they'd rather not go there.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. If you work in a law firm and you're saying, gee whiz, I'm at the bottom of the food chain, I'd like to be a senior partner in the law firm one day, then you realise they're on their 12th marriage and they're working out why 12 other people could be wrong about them. That's a bit of an odd spot, but let's keep working. No lawyers here, are there? Yes. Oh, bummer. Okay. The person who asked me the question was in a law firm. Hell spells. It's time to leave. Okay. So the idea in the food chain is that, yes, there are people above. But one of the reasons why it is sometimes is because we don't know what's going on. And because we don't know what's going on, we're not quite sure what the people upstairs are telling us, whether it's true or not. We say, hey, hang on a sec, just, ping off. I'm not shifting. I'm happy doing what I'm doing, and it's not much fun, but I'm happy doing what I know. And you're going to tell me I've got to do something differently. So if you're in a different part of the organisation, that can be important. But I wanted to talk about competitive isolation because as allied health professionals and health professionals, sometimes we have competitive isolation. Don't tell too many people, particularly our colleagues, too much about what's going on in the top paddock because they'll think we're mad. And madness is a danger. But madness is alive and well, isn't it? It's a good thing to have sometimes. It can help you make really big decisions sometimes that you've never made before. So it's good. So then we roll into this idea of decision making. So I'm interested in why people make decisions, yes. I'm interested in why we spend our days having to do decisions, but I'm more interested now in why people develop decision making fatigue, which is a notion of exhaustion. So if we go this way, here's an idea. Have a read of that. Do you think we are, as we're getting older and more effective or more senior or more engaged in our careers, do you think that we're asked to make consistently good decisions under pressure? Is that fair? Yeah, it's a constant sort of observation. But the thing is that we've got escalating data volumes. So what I mean by that is that a conscious decision that you and I might have had to make once upon a time many years ago is seemingly polluted or complicated by large data volumes. If the world's data has doubled exponentially in the last 2 years on the internet, that's great. Most of it's relationships between your kids and my kids, so don't worry, it's not all real stuff. But in essence, the idea is that data's expanding. So what I find sometimes is that people will come along and they'll say, I've got to make some comprehensive and complex decisions at work. Sometimes it's the volume of the transactions. Sometimes it's the complexity of the transactions, sometimes it's the demands about value disparities, and sometimes it can be, in the course of the day, it can be decisions that don't actually relate to work that we have to make, like decisions in my marriage or decisions in my relationships outside as much as decisions at work, decisions about me internally. So these decisions are growing and the volume of data is increasing. And what's happening is that every time you've got a decision to make, you've got to open a big data file about XYZ's case, or whether we'll open a new school in Toowoomba if you happen to be a politician, etc. So what happens is these large files have to be carried every day. Is that what some of you are noticing? So dense files are important because you've got to drag them up each day and review them. And what it does is it introduces to you and I low-grade panic, guilt and emergency. I wonder if I got all of it. I wonder if all of the stuff is there that I had to make the decision about. Does that happen? Has anyone had that? I wonder if I'm being complete in my assessment of this particular situation. So that's an issue, the increasing data volumes. But also there's another thing that's happening is the intactness of yours and my health. Our intactness is very important. Our physical, medical and mental and spiritual intactness is quite important. If your intactness quotient is high, your vulnerability is low, your ability to actually cope is better, and you can be resilient and adaptable. We'll see that later. Now, what is the sort of coffee shop crossover for girls and boys in terms of when you're falling to bits and the demand on your decision making is rising and you feel you're at a crossroads? What's the crossover age? Just have a pick. 45? Anyone going younger? 35? Anyone going older? 40? Yeah, 40, 45? Okay, it's a sort of this is a rash, suable, sexist statement, not to be quoted anywhere else. But I reckon from watching executives over the last 20 or so years, I think the girls cross over later than the boys. Why is that? Is it because we're told to? Is it because our insurance policies are different to your insurance policies? Why? Any ideas why we cross over earlier than you?
Females seem to cope better because we're always asking for help along the way, while men generally don't always ask for help.
Yep, okay. Rash generalist syllable statement by me, rash general syllable statement by her. Okay? Generally a rash syllable sexist group of people. No. It's important that we take an idea out of this. I think that in the traditional stereotype person, the girls cross over after the boys. But interestingly, working women, I think, are catching up to crossing over earlier than working and about the same time as working men. And I think why that is, and again, don't come down here and beat me to death with a stick, but my idea is that you have the similar competitive isolation demands, expectations and pressures on you in your occupations as we do. And that's generally, I'm noticing that. The higher the food chain people that we see who are women, the more conscious they are of describing their competitive isolation, because they don't necessarily entertain their networks like they have been traditionally thought to have had outside work. Now, is that a crock or not? Come on, we're all health professionals, so we've got to have an opinion on this. So put your hand up if that's a crock. Only one person, thank you. Okay, the rest I assume are voting with me that competitive isolation is increasingly a challenge for working women. Is that correct? Put your hand up if you agree with that. Hooray, one down. Okay, so rolling into this idea. What if we thought about it this way? What if I manage as a health professional my expectations and my limitations? Could I have a gap opening up as I'm getting older? And the answer is yes, there is a gap. However, if I thought about recuperative strategies, what are some things that you and I can do for ourselves? See, if the customer thinks that you and I are looking after ourselves in any shape or form, the customer might actually say, I'll follow that cat, because that's a smart cat. But if you are actually on an oxygen mask, smoking 100 a day, drinking 4 cartons of beer on the weekend because it's a good idea, and you can't walk between the end of your building where you work to the car park without getting angina, then it's really hard to sell well-being. And I know that's very offensive for some, but it's really hard. So we've all got to have a crack at this idea of self-preservation. It's up to us to clean up our own house first before we start cleaning up other people's gardens. And it takes a bit of effort. And what I think it takes is belonging, which we'll talk about shortly. So an idea for me is this. Who's seen Reason's model of human error? No? Okay, Google it if you want to. It's REASSONS, Reason's model of a human error. What it's about is, in brief, is that if you get a load of Jarlsberg cheese, you know this cheese that's got holes in it, and you line it up. Has anyone ever tried to turn all the holes around so you can see straight through? It's a game to play at nursing homes on a sweaty afternoon, okay? But it also could be just a perler at a kindergarten as well, because it can occupy children for hours, and if they don't like it, they'll just eat the evidence. But from that in mind, Reason's model says that if you're at the top of the food chain, you could be a contributor to a disaster in your own business, because you might make a crappy decision someday that influences the decisions of other people. So crappy decisions start at the top. Fish rot from the head. So the idea, if you lead your practice and you have a problem, then you could be unwittingly joining in on some accidents in your practice of health. Now what I'd like you to do is drop out a piece of paper. Everyone's got a piece of paper. This is an exercise that's going to take you about 2 minutes. So on this piece of paper, what I want us to do now as health professionals is have a crack at thinking about, I have no time to look after myself. That's the concept. I have no time to look after myself. I have to look after other people, because when I look after other people, I feel ever so good and better. Here's the thought. Who knows what 168 represents? 168, yes, thank you. 168 hours in a week. There's 52 weeks in a year. If you live till you're 80, you have 4,000 weekends. If you're in the room and you're 50 years old and above, you've only got 1,500 weekends to go. So I suggest you leave now and go and do something hideously exciting, like spend your spouse's money or something, just to have a bloody good time before you go down the hill. No, the idea is 168. So lots of people sometimes come along and they say, oh, I'm really, really busy, Doc, I don't have enough time to do anything. So what I want you to put in the first box is I want you to just quickly think to yourself, how much time am I currently spending on work, including driving from Birdsville to Toowoomba to do the afternoon session at the Boggabri Clinic or something. I want the drive in and the drive back. So just a ballpark. Now, let's just not be cruel to each other. Don't do this week because you're going to sit here for 2 days and that doesn't count. Just take an average week somewhere in the last millennium of your life and say, in an average week, I normally work 48 hours. I drive 12 hours to and from work. I'm studying an MBA at Griffith University after hours while I do everything else for the family. And P.S. by the way, I'm sort of also working at Woolworths collecting, loading bags at the checkout because that's my spare job to complement the income that we get paid so little in the poultry industry of health. Sorry, was I complaining? No. Anyway, the good news is some of it you can do on Medicare, but anyway, no, just kidding. So just that, right? Okay, everybody got that number? Average week. Anyone want more time? Anyone want to take their shoes off to count their toes? Okay, good. Right, the next time is sleep. Now this is a crude balance one. Normally what we're after here is how many hours do I sleep on an average night? So I don't want to know what else you do in bed, okay? I want to just know about the sleeping bit. Now if you reckon that's all you do in bed, that's spectacular. Well done. Don't eat biscuits and stuff. I don't want to know about that. But I just want to know about the bit about when I'm asleep, I'm asleep. I don't really want to talk yet about quality of sleep. I just want to talk about volume of sleep. Put that number down, and then when you've got those two numbers, add them up, please. Take them away from 168, and I'll need that number. 168 minus my work time and my sleep time. I need a number. Anyone want more time? Sorry? Is this for a week or 1 day? No, I'm after a week. Yeah, so 168 minus my weekly tally for work minus my weekly tally for sleep. Let's say if my 60 hours work and my 50 hours sleep gives me 110 hours, minus away from 168 leaves me with 58 hours. That's what the number I'm after. Okay, let's go for the number. Anybody got a number in that box which is 10 hours? That's all you have besides when you take work and sleep away from 168 hours. You have 10 hours left. 10 hours left, good. Anybody got 20 hours? Anybody got 30 hours in the box? Anybody got 40 hours in the box? Anybody got 50 hours in the box? Anybody got 60 hours in the box, or 60 to 50, yeah. Anyone got 70 in the box? Righto, okay, now we're getting a skew in the audience. So most of us have so much time we don't know what to do with it, correct? Righto, here's a go next time. Now, this is really getting a bit tough for a 2-minute interval in a short presentation because the next speaker wants to speak for a few days. So we just have to let her warm up her engine and then she'll go like hell for hours. So I'm just going to try and get there. But let's do the next bit. Let's do the next bit. So what I want now is I want you to ballpark it. So in my 50 hours left, I reckon I spend 10 hours with my mother looking after her. I spend 10 hours at the Rotary Club. I spend 10 hours doing friends. I spend 10 hours with the extended family, not my primary relationship. For those of us who are younger than about 60, Darby and Joan means my wife and me or the other person that I live with. Darby and Joan, sorry. I was accused that was a very old sexist comment from years ago, earlier this week, and I didn't mean to offend anyone. But anyway, your primary relationship. Then what I'm down to is the I time, okay? So just ballparking. I time for some people is sitting on the toilet. That's all they have. I time for some people is not even sitting on the toilet because if you've got a 2-year-old, they know where the toilet is. Anyone ever had that invasion of privacy? Most mothers know about it intimately. They just say, that's not I time. I can't even get that I time. Even combing my hair, I have other people who want to do that as well. So I time. So now we're down in the dark, deep part of our weekly routine. Anybody got a number in the I time box which is 0 to 5 minutes? Yep. Anybody got an I time in the box which is an hour? About an hour a week I do stuff for me and nobody else. Anyone got an hour? Anyone got 2 hours? Anyone got 3 hours? We're losing the crowd at this point, aren't we? Anyone got 1 minute in that box then? Okay. Anybody got anything in the box for I time? Great. What's in the, just yell it out, will you? What's in the I time box? 10 to an hour, 10 minutes to an hour. Holy crap, isn't that thrilling? 10 hours, 10 hours. Oh, good. Those people have got 10 hours, that's great. You can go home now. Off you go. You've had your fun. Yeah. Okay. So a way that some of us who are busy cope is we polylabel. So rather than saying I have to watch the minutes as they tick away, another way that sometimes busy people actually think about managing 168 hours in a week is they talk about the idea of having in their minds poly-labelled time. When I'm doing my MBA, it is I time. It is personal development. It is not just to earn money. When I drive from Birdsville to Toowoomba to do the clinic in the afternoon, I don't just drive to the clinic in my car. I play Led Zeppelin and I scream and yell a lot and I make weird faces at people in the other cars to see if I can get them to steer off the road and crash. It's my time. I like it. Anyone do that, by the way? Anyone want to do it? You can come back with me to Brisbane and you can sit in the back seat because I've got the front seat covered. Okay, so the idea is polylabelling. Busy people can polylabel. So polylabelling is very important. So when you go back and reflect on some of these things, you may actually find that if you're busy, that you can create a well-being time for yourself, a well-being space, a well-being piece, because it's just about how you label it. And that's important. Vacuuming, peeling potatoes, mowing the front lawn, chainsawing the neighbour's trees off at the butt because it's fun, is all I-time related well-being opportunity until they find out where your saw is kept. Then it could be community time. Okay, so on the idea, we've got about 20 minutes or thereabouts to run on this first piece before Amanda comes on. She's going to talk about things different to me. And so we're trying to run the day for all of you where each of the participants and the presenters have got little bits that they're adding to a plan. So what I think it would be really important to think about for yourselves if I could add to the ideas of the day is if you start making some notes in your columns that are about things that each of us have got, because supposedly some of these things are bright ideas. Now they may be as boring as bat manure for you, but you might know them yourself personally. The question is whether you've actually done anything about it. So that introduces an idea in the well-being space, which is I think about it, I write about it, I talk about it. So when we get to I talk about it, many of us can actually get a little further down the Prochevsky-D Clementi circle of doing stuff. Why is that? Why, if we talk about it, could we increase the likelihood?
Once you lay it out, other people hear it and you feel tamed to...
Yeah. Now, if we lay it out for people at a nightclub where we frequent, where we're hoping to pick up somebody else, and we're saying in the loud disco music, I'm thinking about running 1,000 miles next week. What do you think, darling? Would that be a truthful exchange? Well, it could be. You don't know. Could have been my wife in the disco with me and I could have been telling her because I can't keep up with her at the dance floor. But it's possible that the best people to tell this to are the people we're most likely to tell the truth to. And who are we most likely to tell the truth to? Somebody who's possibly a confidant. And I want to talk about that a bit later. So the idea now is where do we go from here? So let's have a look at these people as they come on screen. Any of those people look to you as being resilient or have characteristics of being resilient in the past or potentially resilient in the future? Okay. What is it about them that you think makes them resilient? The journeys they've taken. Now that's interesting. The journeys they've taken. Yep. What else? Their determination. Yes. A characteristic. An experience. A characteristic or a trait. Yes. Anything else? Their achievements. We could say journey, achievements, journey, things I've done. Correct. Yeah. Anything else?
Strength
Beliefs? Who said beliefs? Beliefs. Okay, so these people have a certain belief system which enables them to be resilient. A belief system about what? About their experience of life. That's important. Who said something else? Sorry? A belief system about themselves, yes. Their intactness, if you like, or their ability, yep.
Their purpose.
Their purpose, yes. That's important, isn't it? I'm resilient because my purpose is to help other people. I am a health practitioner. That could make me resilient, perhaps. Their support team. Who's backing them? Could that make them resilient? For example, those guys that climbed Mount Everest, Sir Edmund Hillary, was it his resilience himself to get to the top, or was it the 100 people and Sherpas that helped him on the way? It could be because his collaborative capacity to collaborate with others could make him a resilient person. What else? Overcoming loss. Now that's starting to get into an interesting territory. Overcoming loss. Yep. Yes, up the back. Their genetics, yes. Picking the right parents. It's always helpful. Yep. Anything else? Yes. There? Oh, their courage. Yes, their courage. Yes, their courage. But courage is an interesting thing, isn't it? I know some people who are quite modest, meek, mild people. And yet, you know, if I was sort of talking about courage with some people at the disco, I'd say, you know, I think that this little person that I know is courageous. And they'd say, what? Can't hear your music. Sorry. No, they might say, I'm not sure about that. Yeah. But you're right. You're very right. Yeah. Their passion, yeah.
Their ability to get back to baseline regardless of the highs or the lows.
Yes, now we're talking about recovery. Now that's important, isn't it? Their ability to recover. So it might be their traits, it might be their genetics, it might be the experiences they've had, it might be their ability to interpret those experiences, it might be their capacity to recover. There's a whole bunch of things that are sort of bubbling out. So we are all ready for resilience. So here's a thought. When you do some text reading about it, because it fascinated me, because I was always interested in, you know, the absence of coughs, colds and sore holes. Don't have any illness, I must be good. Now let's start talking about tweaking the engines. Could I be well? What's wellness? What's well-being? What's this well stuff? Then I'm thinking, oh, that's all right. It's all very well to be well. But then what if I actually thought a little bit further down the spectrum and I thought, gee whiz, what about this idea of being resilient? That's about being ready to manage the future. So in companies, when we're talking to companies and people in companies about, you know, how are you going, mate? Are you doing all right in the company? There's an increasing interest in the idea of how do we build resilient workforces? How do we build sustainable, resilient workforces? And that's what our business is interested in as a concept. So there is this idea about the individual trait. There is this idea about the dynamic developmental process, what I went through on the way to getting to here today. There is the idea of what was the outcome, therefore I am who I am. So these are really important ideas. So if we load in my two friends again, then could this be this way? Is my resilience conceptually my ability to prepare for things? Okay? I'm 56 years old, I'm married, my 3 children have left home, I'm sitting here thinking, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I'm obviously need to be chucked on the heap because I'm not good for anything anymore. So bugger off, just go to the dump and get it over and done with. Nobody would have thought of that in this room for a nanosecond, would we? Good. Or is it my ability at that point to prepare what's the next part of my life? Can I start now looking after myself? Could I do something really positive for myself? And what would that do? Maybe it's actually I'm here and now. What's my resilience, my ability to react, my ability to respond right now? Not I'm getting ready for next weekend, but right now, this afternoon. If you go out and the car park's been bombed, are some of you going to say, damn it, I wish I'd had the old car here in the car park this afternoon because that one was at least insured? Or some other things might happen in the car park. But most importantly, I'm interested in how we actually encourage ourselves as health professionals to think about this idea, what's my capacity to repair? Now I sit in my little chair and I yak away to the customers, and I yak away to the customers about all kinds of stuff. and it's good, and I go home feeling warm and fuzzy because I've yacked away to all the customers. But how much of it am I actually, when I'm talking, am I actually saying, I'm going to do this stuff too? Not, I'll get there next week, Bruce. It's just this week's a bit of a bugger. I won't be doing it this week. It'll be okay. So if you're in the plan here today and the next 2 days, ask yourself the question with all the speakers. What's my ability to take on board this stuff to repair myself, to get with the program and start going somewhere? Meanwhile, back at the ranch, every time we go to dinner parties, we are told that resilience is something that is a virtue that sometimes you can only have if you have perfect characteristics, if you have high intelligence, if you have good education, if you have finance. I can be as resilient as I like if I've got $1 zillion in the bank account, but then I might be a warped person. Has anyone talked to a famous rock star lately on In Excess with a lot of money? Did that make him just a tad warped? Maybe, yeah, possibly. So, you know, the perfect game is not always good. Who's from Canberra? Who lives in Canberra? Anyone been to Canberra? Okay. Anyone like Canberra? Anyone knows what happens in Canberra? Anyone want me to tell them a secret about Canberra? Yes. Everything works. Everything works in Canberra. You can have a traffic jam of 4 cars. It works. The traffic jam clears itself by 8:10 because there's 3 lanes of traffic for the 4 cars. That's why it works. It's fantastic. If you want to go to the lavatory in Canberra, you can go to 12 of them. They're all geographically located beside each other in a circle around the lake. Spectacular. The dunnies are where you need them. So are the politicians, all in one place. No, but just kidding. Canberra is interesting because Canberra actually works. It's a community that works really well. It's actually got congruence. It actually has a perfect beige harmony. Does that make the Canberraites resilient? Yeah, it does. I've got the money, I'm a Polly, I'm in Canberra, I can tell you anything, I'll be resilient. Yeah. No, it doesn't. I ask the question. They are good people, don't get me wrong. But here's the thought. There's no evidence of resilience in either of these people, if you ask me. But now let's put this cat up on the screen. Now, what about him gets some of us with our lights on? What is it about him that makes you switch your lights on? How could a man be locked up for 20 years and have the crapper beaten out of him and be just appallingly treated and come out and demonstrate compassion? How could he do that? Wouldn't you and I be angry? If I could find those bastards that did that to me, sort of thing. And yet he didn't. How extraordinary. What a light rod for the rest of us. If just you and I could just take one little grey hair out of the top of his head and hang on to it and say, man, if I can hang on to that, I'll be going in the right direction because this guy is really worth bottling. He's extraordinary. He's extraordinary. He's extraordinary because he's got this interesting thing. He's got this bounce back thing going. It's kind of bubbling out of him. It's extraordinary what he's done. It's when you meet customers. Who's met some clients and they've got this bounce back thing going really well? Who's got a bounce back customer? Yeah, I'm sure we've all got lots of them. But what we're looking to do is to try and help more of them be bounce backers. But also the ability to move forward positively, the ability not only to survive but to thrive. Now that's the trajectory of healing that somebody said, the recovery thing, and that's the adversity thing coming out. So that's important. Who was in the clean-up in one of the towns in Queensland in the last 2 or 3 years? Who's been in a clean-up? Okay, who got an SMS to join the clean-up? Anyone get an SMS, or did you just turn up with a shovel and a bucket and start cleaning? We have no idea what happened in the flood in Brisbane. We have no idea, but I can tell you a short story, really short. I have an aunt of mine who lived in Fig Tree Pocket in the 1974 floods. 1974, some of you weren't even a feature, and you may not have been born, but there are some of us who were born in 1974. And the interesting thing about 1974 was that she was in Fig Tree Pocket. It took us 3 days as a family that lived out near west of Dalby. It took us 3 days to get a message to her to find out if she was alive. Not only if she was alive, but if she was actually okay. Anyway, her house was flooded. It took us 5 days from the bush to get to Brisbane, to get to Fig Tree Pocket to clean her house out. Her house had 6 inches of mud in it by 5 days out. It was just appalling, just appalling. But anyway, we thought we were pretty courageous. We'd come down to save our aunt, and we thought that was pretty good. It's what you do. What you do for your little family. But what if you actually trot out a bunch of people that don't even know each other? What if you actually just put them out in the street with brooms and buckets? What's that? Is that resilience? Do you think? No? That's the ability to recover. That's the ability to repair. That's being played out right in front of yours and my eyes. That's why SMSing is spectacular. That's why the media and the internet is fantastic. That's why us old fogies need to stand back for a minute and say, this internet's really bad. The internet did that, and so did social media did that, and did it admirably, and brought people out who'd never been joined together at all to do stuff. And that was adapting to change. So here's a thought which one of the ladies in the front pulled up first, which I like about resilience. Resilience is an idea. It's an idea about meaning in adversity. It's about embracing discomfort. It's about what are you and I doing each morning when we wake up and saying, this bit is uncomfortable. Now I can either lie down and die, I can have a think about it, and I can have a crack at changing it. My well-being and my getting to my well-being where I feel well, it might be a discomfort, but have a crack. You can't lose. It's worth a go. And the last bit I really like for kids, which came from another person, so it's not mine, but I like it, is this idea of building landmass from islands of self-competence in a sea of self-doubt. How powerful is that? Okay? How powerful is that? It's really hot property, if you ask me, because when we're raising our sons and daughters, that is what we're trying to do as parents. And when we're talking to our clients who are somewhat on the edge, physically, medically, mentally and spiritually, that's something we can talk to them about. So, on the way out now, we've got 10 minutes of a dump on some things that people do that I've seen that can enable them to do quite well, to enable them to do things and to be resilient and to be somewhat well in their own mind, because wellness is in your own mind and well-being is in your own mind as much as it is in the minds of others. To feel well, to be well, to think well. To think well, to write well, to talk well. That's an important consideration. So, the systems of good behaviour. Now, here's a system of bad behaviour. My wife puts 400 cartons of Tim Tams in our fridge every evening. It is really good because I can eat 200 of those between the car and our kitchen and to the dining room table. She has got me picked. I love her for it because Tim Tams are my favourite pastime. I can eat them, sleep with them, I can do all sorts of things with Tim Tams. She is the best system of bad behaviour I've ever invented. Has anyone got anything that looks like that? Just wiggle your feet in case you get sprung by your relatives. Did anyone come today with their spouse? Did anyone come with someone else's spouse? Okay, just a thought. Righto. So, most of us are on the ball. Most of us know about exercise. Most of us know about diet. Most of us know about the idea of sleep. Sleep's pretty important. It's amazing. If you get a good night's sleep and you exercise well and you have good confidence, you can just about take on most things that are coming down the turnpike. Checkups are really good too. I'm astounded at how many friends. I went to my reunion for my year in medicine just recently, and I said to everybody in the room, how many people have actually had another doctor touch them in the last 2 years to check things that drop off, fall off and don't work anymore? Things that used to be up here but are now down there. Used to be in here but are now out there. How many of you? Come on, because these are all my mates from my year. Guess how many out of a whole year's reunion? There was only 2 of us there, by the way. No, just kidding. No, there were about 50 of us. 3. Someone had stuck a glove on and got close to them. And they said, not too close today, bucko. I'll just have the MRI scan, it's safer. Okay. There's another group of people who've developed not only health principles or systems of good behaviour around health, they've got hobbies. Who's got a hobby? Okay, when was the last time you did a hobby? Just call it out. 1 day ago, 2 days ago, 6 years ago, or when the prickly pear was bad out at Roma? Last week. Okay, any of the people who did it last week, what happens when you're doing your hobby? And if so, what is that last week you did your hobby?
Motorcycle riding.
Motorcycle riding. That's the lady who's got the Led Zeppelin thing inside her helmet and she drives on the highway, so look out for her. Yeah, no, sorry. And what happened? Oh, no, who else has done a hobby? That is a hobby, by the way, yeah? What's yours? Quilt. Let's go with the quilting. It's safer, okay? Doesn't involve high-speed accidents. No. So with the quilting, what happens when you're quilting? Yes. And what else happens while you're going along with quilting besides signing out? Huh? Yes. Two things are important. Creativity, time to think, space to breathe. It's a kind of form of Anglo-Saxon meditation. Okay? However, if you're bungee jumping off Mount Everest, it's a bit hard to have time to think, space to breathe, and a sort of a harmonious state if that's your hobby. So certain hobbies have got certain qualities. But hobbies are really good because in hobbies, sometimes we create self-awareness. Self-awareness is quite good because that's about what you and I think about, reflecting about what drives us. What are the emotions that you and I need? So self-awareness is pretty important. Those of us who've been on holidays lately, anyone had a holiday this Christmas? Put your hand up if you went on holidays at Christmas. Anyone not have a holiday at Christmas? Okay. Anyone not have a holiday in the last 12 months? Okay. Can you leave now and take the rest of the day off as a holiday? Okay, holidays are really good. What's good about holidays? Relaxed, yes. What's sometimes good about holidays? Sometimes. You get to be with your family, the people you love, the ones you genetically produced, the ones you genetically sometimes you wish you didn't produce. But anyway, it's possible, it's feasible. Sometimes my parents say that too about genetic reproduction, probably about me too, so it's all in the can. But still, the idea is self-regulation. It's quite interesting when you self-regulate your habits. But more importantly, when we talk about reactiveness, when we talk about responsiveness and intuitiveness. So that's a spectrum, that's a scale of moving from being a reactive person to being a responsive person to being intuitive as a person. Sometimes when we take a holiday, that would be good. But a holiday in the 168, a holiday in the 168 space is interesting because you can have a holiday, if you want to label it that way, driving to work. I just had a 10-minute holiday. What does that do? Well, it's teaching me some skills that I didn't have otherwise. Normally I'm responsive in the traffic to people with motorbike helmets that have hobbies like that. But I've learnt that perhaps being responsive is not right. Better than reactive. And I'm thinking about being intuitive. Give the lady some space. Is that an intuitive relationship with the lady? Probably, maybe, I don't know. I'm just putting it out there for you because you're here sitting freewheeling, thinking, oh, I don't know if I want to buy into that little bit of rubbish. I'll take the first slide but not the third slide. I'll take what Amanda's going to give me, I'll take what the next person, what Bob's going to give me this afternoon. I'm not taking that front bit. It doesn't matter, just take some of it. Happiness is interesting. Intuitive. Yeah, intuitive. Who wants to have a go before me? Who's a psychologist? Put your hand up if you're in psychology.
I would say intuitive is being aware without someone having to tell you something that you're already conscious of.
Yeah, I reckon that's pretty good. How's that for intuitiveness? I'm aware without being told. That's not bad. And I think that's a very interesting personal development piece. We've been given the hurry up bit. Okay, we've got 3 minutes. Okay, I just went here, happiness. One of the things that seems to be important for those who are resilient is a sense of belonging. Belonging to what? Belonging to groups. We're gregarious animals seeking to get ahead. Gregariosity is quite important. Those who have good habits around the development of resilience oftentimes have a sense of belonging. If you don't belong, it's very difficult. If you're competitively isolated, competitive isolation, don't tell too many people too much about what's happening inside your head. The next one is hugging. Hugging's interesting because we're just confronting hugging in its most cruelest, ugliest form. The indulgences that we're seeing in the inquiries where people are actually being able to come forward and express that this was where hugging went wrong. This is where people invaded territory they should never have invaded. However, if you were in a more ideal world, some of us have gained a tremendous amount of benefit, positive benefit, from being able to touch and compliment somebody else, like hugging our wife or hugging our husbands, squeezing our hunk of burning love, whatever you want to call them. It's a really interesting capacity. But why would I put hugging up with empathy? Well, empathy is really interesting because it's all part of the idea of understanding the other person, not sympathising with them. And as health professionals, sometimes we inherit monkeys, which creates the model of sympathy, causing us to create problems in our own health. But empathy is the ability to understand and put ourselves in the other person's place, and for that we might have a sense of respect and engagement. Higher authority. Got 2 minutes on that clock? Yeah, this is like... No, Amanda said I could talk for her 20 minutes. So not. Oh, I've got 1 minute left, quick. Higher authority. If we get a chance tomorrow in the next session, I can talk to you about this. The difference between coaches, confidants, mentors and selectors. It's quite important that we define those. The next one is actually helping. Those who have good resilience seem to help others. Motivation beyond money. Job, work, purpose, passion. We could do that tomorrow as a breakdown, defining in yours and my lives as workers. What's the difference between the job, working for the health department, the work being a doctor, purpose, looking after others, passion, I'm really good at it. And then last but not least is the notion of spirit, which is the idea that some of the people who are the most resilient are oftentimes those who have a value set and a practice set which is congruent. They actually live and breathe what they value. So these two people, Hazel and Harry, are 85 and 81, and they have just recently completed a rowing race, which is 23 kilometres up the Murwillumbah River. And Hazel took it up she's 81, and she took it up 5 years ago because Harry had been doing it for 10 years, and she was annoyed because Harry used to leave and go off and have fun all the time. So she decided at 75 that she was going to join Harry. She didn't care what he thought about it, by the way, but she was going to join him. And that, I think, is you're never too late to start. So we've covered competitive isolation. It's an interesting concept. It needs to be explored by us as health professionals. We've touched on decision making, which is not about the actual decisions, but the fatigue that comes with it. We've touched on Reason's Swiss cheese model of error, and data overload, how to manage that with your outsourced hard drive called Dr. Google. The resilience is meaning in adversity, the islands of confidence, the sense of being intact, being less vulnerable, being able to cope and being more resilient. And the 8 H's, and last but not least, 168, which is what am I going to do to polylabel my day? Thank you very much for your time.